I was thinking, you effectively are the festival, so thank you so much. Our amazing team has put this on with our partners, but if you weren't here, we'd have no festival, so thank you. Now, I am Maria Penga Wallace. I lead on our advanced program, which is our network for mid to senior tech folk. So if you haven't signed up, please do so to find out about all of the different and amazing things that we have coming up. So we have our very esteemed panel with me today who are going to introduce themselves in a moment to talk about this really important topic. But before we get into that, just to let you know that we'll be having a conversation for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we will open it out and see if we can get some of your Q&A, your questions. Hopefully we'll have the answers as we get for our conclusion. Okay, so hello, Dawn. Hello, Dominic.
I don't know if my mic is working. Is it working?
I can hear you perfectly.
Can you hear me?
Can everyone hear Dawn?
Yes. Got a light on it. Dominic's one's got a light. Hello? I'm very jealous.
So, as I said, thank you so much for coming along to talk about this topic. Please, if you could, just share a little bit about your role and what it involves.
So, my name obviously is Dawn Osborne, and I am the Senior Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Manager across Northern Europe for Atos. And my primary responsibilities are driving initiatives and programs across Northern Europe for all of our employees. And working for a tech company is really, really exciting, especially Atos, which they're a leader in cybersecurity and decarbonisation, so a really solid company to work for.
Thank you very much. Dominic?
I'm Dominic. I am the founder of Missing Black People. It's an organisation that helps amplify the appeals of missing black people in the UK. We work alongside... Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. We work alongside the Met Police. We work alongside other charities, not just in the on-the-ground work of finding missing people, but in the structural work too. I'm also a co-founder of a company in the US called Inside Voices. We help companies retain employees of color. So we collect lots of data, and then we tell companies, or we suggest ways that they can retain employees of color.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, it's wonderful that you come from so many such different backgrounds, because I'm anticipating that you'll bring different perspectives as well to this topic. So, as you know, we're talking about, resignation, when the tough gets going, why do the black people get going? And we're going to explore, how that shows up. Is it reality? Is it perception? Is it an assumption? So before I do that, can I just get a show of hands? Has anyone considered leaving their role in the last 6 months? Okay. Oh, it's increasing. So it's about 20% of the room. And I'm going to assume that the other people aren't doing so because they're sitting beside their boss. Is that right? So a report from Microsoft, their 2021 Work Trend Index, it found that 41% of people are likely to consider leaving their job in the next year. And that's been reinforced by other pieces of research as well. So why do we think that is? Why do we think it is such a high number that are considering or actually have left their current role?
Well, I would say, and for a good reason, there's lots of opportunity now within the job market. And a lot of people are taking advantage of that. If I think about, years ago and how we are, some of us culturally, we stick jobs out for years and years, no matter what's going on, no matter how we're being treated. But now we have much more choice, and we are exercising that choice. And I believe that, the pandemic and the social injustices that have happened have really empowered people to do something different and to go for what they want within their careers. And why not? And why not? The opportunity's there. Take it.
Thank you, Tom.
I agree with the opportunity part, but I also think there's a part of it where especially younger generations are becoming more confident and more empowered to not stand up for, I can't find a nicer way to say it, but BS in the workplace. And combined with the more opportunities, combined with an easier way to build your network, it's not as a bigger cost leaving the organization or leaving a team.
Thank you so much. And so some research came out probably about a month ago, and it coincided with some research it was from the Trade Union Commission. There was also research from Runnymede, which showed that the Runnymede research with Fawcett, it showed that black women in particular, as well, actually it was women from diverse backgrounds, are more likely to experience racism, microaggressions, and be looked over for promotion. So kind of leading into my next question. So the title of this is When the Tough Gets Going, Why Do the Black People Leave? Which kind of indicates that when an environment becomes difficult, we're choosing to leave. So I just wondered what your thoughts are. Do you think this is the case? Are we choosing to leave?
I think if an organization's anti-black and I am black and I choose not to be there, I don't think that's a choice. That's my bar. That's a non-negotiable. If the organization's anti-black, or if you don't want to say anti-black, but if they're practicing behaviors and a culture that doesn't support my culture, that's not a choice. That's a non-negotiable. The same with being a woman, where women have to also deal with being a woman, but also being a black woman or a woman of color. There's like almost double the discrimination or triple the discrimination you're going to get. There's certain things that are non-negotiables, and I think with the opportunities that many people have now, we're becoming more comfortable with setting that hard bar of the non-negotiables, where parents and grandparents probably would have just dealt with it and did just deal with it.
Yeah, don't rock the boat. But now it's very much that boat needs to be rocked. Dawn, your thoughts?
Yeah, when I read that title, I was like, oh gosh, it is really tough. And, just as Dominic says, why should we put up with that? The bar is in a certain place now, and we don't have to put up with it. I do think that it becomes even tougher from a mental health perspective, from a well-being perspective, when you have to stay in those conditions as well. And I think that's why people go. But it shouldn't get to that. It really shouldn't get to that in organisations, and we should be looking after our employees a lot more, I think. But that's what I'm saying.
And it can become frustrating. I've seen a number of organisations talk about, and actually mental health first aid is, I've been part of that process. I think it's very helpful. But if organisations aren't looking at the systems and what's happening within the organisation to address why someone's well-being may be lower, then it can become ineffective. And to some extent, it can be gaslighting, actually. Maybe we should have changed the title to Can These Interventions Feel Like Gaslighting? Right. Calm down, Maria. So a number of tech organisations are reducing their staff numbers. We know this. There's a recruitment freeze with the current environment. And so there was a recent organisation who said that they would be doing their redundancy through an anti-racist and anti-oppression lens. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that approach.
Yeah, well, my thoughts really are that the fact that they have to start looking at redundancies through that lens, it's too late. It's way too late. Okay, so we need to be looking at our organizations at an earlier stage where we're embedding policies, processes, initiatives that are anti-racist, that do remove systemic barriers. So if you do, unfortunately, have to go into a staff reduction, those people who are doing well in the organization will not suffer. But then there's also the other side of that for me is, embedding those processes. For example, if you're basing a staff reduction on, people's appraisals, if you've got a line manager who needs retraining or they have some issues, then that is going to affect, whether you're being made redundant or not. So it's really, really, for me, about embedding those things earlier so they're part of the company's DNA, part of the culture, and there are no excuses.
Thank you so much, John. Dominic, your thoughts?
I think it's good marketing and communications. It's what I think over the last couple of years most companies learned they should be saying where they wasn't saying it before. But I think if they haven't attacked this from a cultural standpoint in their organization, they cannot isolate redundancy and say, hey, we're going to look at redundancy through this lens, whatever lens they say they're looking at it through. And they're not looking at hiring, they're not looking at promotion, they're not looking at compensation, they're not looking at anything else through that same lens.
Now, I suppose it's really important for an organisation who is going to make that bold claim to have the context as well, because if I'm from the majority cultural background, if I'm a white man, I'll think, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm under attack, that I'm under threat? So I think if you are going to make that a goal, that an objective, that it's important for there to be context as well, and like you say, for it to be throughout the organisation rather than an afterthought. Okay, wonderful. So do think about your questions, everyone. We're going to be coming to you in a moment, so have a think about what you might want to ask. So we saw on Instagram in particular, probably a few months ago now, this concept of quiet quitting. And it was associated with Instagram because apparently, people were sharing how they were disengaging from their work. But do you think this could be another way of great resignation or, resigning from work?
I think it's interesting, especially when you talk about social media. I think people have been doing that for a very, very long time, if not generations. It's just branded as something now. And I think that's the way media picks it, especially mainstream media picks it up. Once it's branded as something, it's easier for them to pick up. But many of us have been doing this before, disengaging. And I think any employee, regardless of background, is going to be disengaged once they feel like the organization doesn't care about them. And that's organizations not caring about people is not a new thing.
Thank you, John.
I agree with that. And I don't think it's specifically black people that are doing that. I think people have been doing it for a while. And that disengagement doesn't mean that you're not doing your job either, because, when I left my last job, I was very much, I knew in my head, I'm done. And I started looking for a new role, but I still knew that I had to perform in my current role. So I still delivered, but I'd made that decision. So that's how I think, okay, maybe that's quiet quitting. But as Dominic says, it's just another label, right? We've been doing it for a long time.
Thank you so much.
There's other articles that I've seen that what's actually changing is that now we're just doing our job that we got paid to do rather than doing the most. Because typically in the environment we work in the capitalist environment, you're rewarded for trying to do the most while getting paid for doing your very, very specific job. And I think now, I don't think it's just related to black people. I think COVID and like the economic landscape globally, everything's just happened so quickly over the last couple of years. And I think people are just rethinking their priorities in the workplace and even how they approach work.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people have, got used to the benefits of working remotely and they recognize that they are flourishing in a hybrid environment, then if you're then an organization who said, actually, we need you 3 days in the office and there's no kind of in consultation with what that looks like, then as you say, there's more opportunity. There's, we're going to have different expectations of how we work and how we flourish now. So my final question, thank you both, is so in 2020 we saw organizations take really bold steps with demonstrating their commitment to race equity. And my question to you is, could you share some advice for an organization that wants to look at their approach for retaining talent, in particular black and ethnically diverse talent?
Okay. So a lot of organizations have said a lot of things, and I'm not sure if we've actually seen the tangible outcomes of what they said, especially from different Black Lives Matter protests. They made these, and this is why I talk about the marketing and communication department, they've made these commitments, or they've said these things, and I don't think we've seen the tangible outcomes, especially when you talk about grassroots communities. So dealing with missing Black people, you have big charities. If you want to talk about big charities, you have, in my space, Missing People, you have Red Cross, huge charities. Typically, they're giving, if they're going to give money, they're giving to these big charities, when the people actually doing a lot of the work are the grassroots organizations actually doing the work to make the change. But they're not connecting with those, they're connecting with the big charities because it's easier to manage that relationship. I think one way, there's lots of ways they can take a step forward, but if you're going to make those statements, actually be about the work and have some tangible outcome or practical outcome to show for it. And it's not just like, this is real people's lives. So it's actually worse for you to make that statement and not really do something, or not really clear, than not make a statement at all. And it's what it seems like, a lot of organizations are making a statement and not really doing the work, and it would have been better off just them not to say anything.
Do you know of an organization that's done that pretty well? I don't want to talk about this too much because it's going to come up in our next conversation, but it would be interesting to know, based on that advice, have you seen an organization do that quite well?
I haven't seen, and this is just my personal opinion, I haven't seen any large organization do that well, but also my standards very high. I'm very particular especially when it comes to community issues and social issues with my community. I haven't seen them doing well, but also I don't think they can do it well, which is why I'm partner with the grassroots organizations. If you're going to give money, get out the way. Usually what happens is they give money, you have to satisfy this criteria to get the money, especially when you're talking about grassroots organizations, whether they're working with young people, whether they're working with women. A lot of the people are volunteers that started the organization, and they're not checking everything. So if you say, hey, you need to have X amount in revenue and you need to have this business plan, they're not going to have that. They're just doing the work. They're just helping people. Give the money, get out of the way. And I haven't really seen that. Usually there's some kind of strings attached to it, which is hard for a grassroots organization to satisfy.
Thank you so much. Dawn?
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts on this. First thought, coming from a big tech company, we did make a bold statement. And one thing I think that's really important is accountability. So obviously they usually come from very senior people in the organization, and our CEO made the bold statement. But what I ensure as a DEI professional is that accountability is carried through. So where we've said we want to see more people of color in senior positions, what are we doing about that? And if I face any blocks, I've got someone to go to and speak to about that. So I think that's really, really important. Also, there's something about, I don't think we should underestimate how long actually seeing diverse employees well represented in the workplace is going to take in some areas. It's just a long haul, and that is because of some of the systemic barriers that are there that need to be broken down, and it's really complex and deep. And I'm not saying it can't be done, but we're in it for the long haul, and it just takes a long time. But on the flip side of that, I'm on the chair of a charity called ESP Foundation. And that charity works with young people to keep them in school, and they run sports programs. And absolutely, you're right about the funding. There are so many. To get funding, you have to tick so many boxes. And we want to stay true to ourselves within that charity. And you could see why people will just say, yeah, I'll do that, and actually not do it, but take the money. So it's really complicated, and the two need to come together. I don't really have a straight answer for you, Maria, on that one.
But I would like to hear of some of the interventions that have been effective in ATOS, though, in terms of retaining talent, if there are any that you feel comfortable to share?
Well, for us, for me, I think we need to pay attention, right? Because if you just don't pay attention to your employees, then you get the quiet quitting, and they're gone. And usually, if you try and counter-offer them, it's too late, right? They're getting way more money somewhere else or a better deal somewhere else. So for me, the initiatives like we have an initiative called Empower, which is a community for Black and Asian employees. They come together. We have a sponsorship program as part of that. And that sponsorship program is, the sponsors are senior leaders, hopefully removing barriers for those that want to progress, and actually just paying attention to what people need and keeping our ear to the ground. Because if you just leave it, like I say, they're gone.
I think you've mentioned two really important aspects there. It's the sponsorship, so recognizing that mentoring can only go so far. There's merit in mentoring. However, sometimes the sponsorship, having that senior leader to talk about you behind the closed doors, to vouch for your work when you're not in the room, and also listening. It sounds very simple, doesn't it?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Why isn't everyone doing it?
I mean, it is very simple if they wanted to do it. And I want to push back against something you said, that it was something along the lines of that it's hard because it's systemic. It is hard and it is systemic, but if they wanted to do it tomorrow, it will get done tomorrow. Just like they can lay off a third of their workforce tomorrow because they have to do it. If they felt they had to make cultural changes to be more inclusive, to have their employees feel like they belong in the organization tomorrow, it would happen. But it has to come from the top. And the professionals like yourself have to be empowered by the CEO, by the leadership, by the board, but it has to be something they really believe. I think the changes don't just come from jumping on the bandwagon of like what's going on in the media. It's going to come from them actually believing that. And at least in my interactions, it is questionable whether like the senior leadership actually believe that and believe that it's valuable to their organization. We have all the studies that prove how valuable diversity is, but yet we don't see those changes that could actually help their business.
Yeah, but it's systemic even in leadership teams, right? So there are so many blocks. I don't really know how to respond to that. I just think, for me, I just keep powering through and trying to find those blocks wherever they are. But sometimes they're very embedded. And that's just me as personal experience, actually experiencing the day-to-day grind. But yeah.
And as a DEI professional, it can't just be you.
Amen.
That is, you see, I said they were from different backgrounds and we're going to have a little bit of a different opinion. I love that. Now, to those of you in the room who said that you are content, engaged in your roles, I'd love to hear from one of you, what is your organization doing? What are you enjoying that is keeping you engaged within your roles at the moment? Would anyone like to share? What is your employer doing at the moment that's keeping you engaged? Thank you.
I would say for me is having a role that works around your life and works around you as an individual. And, to be in a position where you're not micromanaged and you feel like you can work best when you have the time to also work on yourself whilst also working on your career. I think that balance for me has been really beneficial because I know that, there's this sort of anxiety of working in a space where you feel like you have to put your work before your mental health, you have to put your work before who you are, and that can really cause you to not only hate your job, but worst case scenario, hate yourself. So it's so important to be able to have that balance in your workspace. That does come with communication, and some of it is luck as well, because you could just be in a position where your jobs really value that and give you the flexibility and the time, or it might even be just simply your role means that it allows you to do such. But that's what's kind of been working for me so far. But yeah, I think it was something that was new to me because I came straight out of education and went straight into a role that was like that. So for me, it's like, this is all I...
Wow, that was very positive.
To touch wood. So.
Ooh, okay.
But yeah, especially the things that I hold important to me, like my own mental health. As you said it's non-negotiable, and that's something for me that's non-negotiable. And if I can't let that adapt with my working space, then unfortunately I'm out. So yeah.
I love the fact that this is your first role and that's how empowered you feel about, kind of demonstrating what your values are, what your thresholds are, and what are really important to you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So,
I was just going to say, that I think that's commendable in your first role. It took me years to get to that point. So it's really amazing. And even, just the last job I moved for flexibility because I was doing too many hours. And as a single mum of a 6-year-old, I was like, I just can't do this anymore. So, and that was the reason I moved. And I was able to get a job that fitted in with my lifestyle. So it's really, really important to go out for what you want. So well done.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, Dominic, thank you very much. I'm going to open it out now. Any more thoughts, any more suggestions, ideas, questions?
Hello. Thank you all for sharing your views so far. I'm just looking at the question, and for a bit of context, I'm a HR business partner for a tech company. It's international, so we're based in the UK, Denmark, US, and APAC, so an interesting mix. One of the things that I've noticed, especially in the last, I'd say 18 months, in both of the roles that I've been in, is what we're trying to do in the HR field, especially, is tell people to bring their whole selves to work. We're saying things like psychological safety. We're using words like belonging. And I think all of these are super important concepts, but sometimes they're buzzwords. So then when Black and minority ethnic people in particular come to work and they're bringing their whole selves and they're calling things out, it's a bit like, not now, not yet, not like that. And when I look at that question, just from where I'm sitting over the last 18 months, that is, I think, one of the key reasons that I've seen play out. So I would just love, I suppose, all of your thoughts on that, and whether you think the kind of whole bring your whole self to work 24/7, but also pipe down when we're not doing things very well, is contributing to the quiet quitting, the resignations. We'd just love to hear all of your thoughts on it.
Fantastic question that I'm sure many others have been thinking. There's some nods around the room. Thank you. Panel?
My short answer is yes, I think it's contributing. But when I hear bring your whole self to work, I never thought it was for me. I know I still have to code switch. I know I still have to change once I hit the workplace. My hair, everything has to be different. It was never designed for me. Do the people saying that know that? Maybe, maybe not. But yes, I think that's contributing. And I don't think mainstream culture, so in my experience, I've worked both in the US and UK, and actually they're the same but kind of drastically different. I worked in the Midwest, which you have very specific employment laws, and it's interesting there, very different. And I worked in the UK here, but it's the same in that you have to code switch, you have to change, and they both give buzzwords, different buzzwords, but again, it's not for us. And I understand that, and it's actually, when I'm speaking in the schools, especially to black kids, it's probably the biggest gap, because if you don't know, if you haven't had mentors, if you haven't done work experience, I was a basketball player, so many of the basketball players, younger ones that I'm teaching, haven't gone and done the work experience because we've been so in the sport, and you don't know. Actually, there's a whole cultural shift, and if you just listen to what's said in the media, or you just listen to like mainstream narrative, you don't realize actually there's a different set of rules for you, especially in the workplace. And this does contribute, but I think what contributes the most is not understanding that. And there's many people that go into the workplace and they don't know, oh, as a black woman, as a black man, the rules are different. We kind of know generally in society, but there's very specific ways to navigate the corporate world as a black person.
I would agree with that. And I actually don't believe in the statement, bring your whole self to work. I think it's a pile of rubbish, to be honest. Because I just don't think it's possible. And like you're saying, you're talking about the code switching, there is a certain way that you have to present yourself in the working environment. And sometimes that may not go with what you're like when you're out with your friends. I don't know. So for me, it's about really passing that knowledge onto the up and coming. So some of the work we do is have schools come in, or, and really talk to them about the world of work. Or, we have a really great grad scheme, and that grad scheme is representative and there are mentors attached. So, yeah, absolutely, it's not possible.
Thank you so much. I mean, I absolutely love that question because I'm seeing it so often. We're an organisation where we encourage you to be your authentic selves because we see the value in that. But yet there's no psychological safety in order to express yourself authentically. And I think for me, it's about organisations, like you say, going beyond the cliche to really show up. And it's kind of associated with what you were saying, Dawn, about the listening. I don't think organisations listen enough. And what I mean by that is deep listening. Because a lot of organisations do engagement surveys, will do focus groups, but then they don't take on board what they're hearing and they go back to how they've always done it. So I think it is about, really listening to what your people are saying.
May I add one?
Of course.
So something I see, especially as I run this organisation, We're Missing Black People, and typically in the workplace, a lot of the CEOs or executives expect, especially black people, social issues end when I get into the workplace. When actually, this kid has gone missing and the body was found, and that impacts everybody in the community. It impacts and the workplace doesn't, and the founders don't actually realize that, and they expect you to just leave those issues once you enter the workplace. But these are real issues in real people's lives. And even though I deal with missing people, it can be stop and search, it can be many different issues, especially in the UK, in London, we're in London, that it has a real impact on people, and I can't just switch that off when I get into the workplace, but the expectation is to switch it off when I get into the workplace. And that's something I think people find challenging.
It's a really, really important point. Thank you. Ooh, 2 more questions. I'm getting the signal that we can only have one. You did have your hand up before. Oh, that person had their hand up before? Really? Shelton, please, could we have 2? Is that all right? They're sticking with us rather than Steve Bartlett. Oh! Well, if you're real quick, please can you make them real quick?
Okay.
And then just one response to each, please.
So, in talking about bringing your whole self to work, or whatever the hell that means, I, in my experience, having an example of leadership that actually does that is incredibly valuable. But then it becomes less valuable if the leadership that's talking about this is very different to you, because they're playing by different rules. So, for any efforts to work, I think we probably want to start looking at diversity and inclusion and the kind of sort of breadth of representation at the leadership level, which is something we don't have yet. What do you think? What things do you think we should? Not, I don't want to say we should be doing, but what steps what do you think needs to happen to increase the levels of diversity, inclusion, representation, all of it at leadership levels where we can actually make a difference to what's happening in the future?
Okay, real quick, please, Dawn.
I'll try and be quick. I think we've definitely got a pipeline issue. I think the Great Resignation is giving us pipeline because people are leaving and moving up to more senior levels, and we need to fast track those people through the organisation. It needs more sponsorship.
Thank you so much. Very succinct.
Okay, I think I'm done.
Yep. I'm so sorry. Please do ask our speakers, will you be around to be able to respond to the questions that weren't asked? Thank you so much. Round of applause, please. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.